I thought I knew my family. I thought I was safe in my own home. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw that night. My nephew, sweet, innocent, and quiet, stood at my bedroom door, staring at me with eyes that didn't look like his own. And when he whispered, "I've been waiting for you," I felt a chill that told me my life would never be the same. I had always been close to my nephew Ryan. He was quiet, well-mannered, and had the kind of gentle personality that made people instantly trust him. His mother, my sister Jessica, was a single mom who worked long hours, so Ryan often stayed with me whenever she needed help. I didn't mind. I loved having him around. We'd spend evenings watching movies, cooking dinner, and laughing over silly jokes. I genuinely enjoyed his company. He was thoughtful, always offering to help around the house, and he seemed mature for his age, almost too mature at times. But that was just Ryan, and I never thought twice about it. The week he came to stay with me, I was juggling work deadlines and personal stress. I remember feeling relieved to have Ryan there, someone to keep me grounded. Everything felt normal, until it didn't. That day started like any other. I had wrapped up work and decided to relax in a long, hot bath. I needed it after the stressful week I'd had. The warm water and steam created a cocoon of comfort, and for the first time in days I felt at peace. But as I closed my eyes, the faint sound of footsteps broke through my calm. At first, I brushed it off as the house settling or Ryan moving around. But then, the creak of the bathroom door handle sent my heart racing. I called out his name, "Ryan?" But there was no answer. Just silence. And then a soft whisper. "Aunt Megan." His voice was so low I almost didn't hear it. But the way he said my name, it wasn't how he usually spoke. There was something different in his tone. Something unsettling. I froze. My mind raced with possibilities. Was he hurt? Scared? Or was it something else entirely? When I told him to come in, the door creaked open slowly, and there he stood. His face was familiar, but his eyes, those eyes, felt like they belonged to someone else. And that's when he said it. "I've been waiting for you." My heart sank, and in that moment I knew, whatever was happening, this wasn't the Ryan I thought I knew. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. Maybe Ryan was just playing a prank, testing boundaries like kids sometimes do. But the way he stood there, unmoving, sent a chill through me. "Ryan," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Is everything okay?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, his eyes locked on mine. "You never notice me," he said softly, almost too softly. "What do you mean?" I asked, sitting up straighter in the tub, suddenly feeling exposed despite the water covering me. He didn't answer. His gaze drifted to the floor, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of hesitation, as if he were battling with himself. But then just as quickly it was gone. "I need you," he whispered. His words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My heart pounded in my chest as I gripped the edge of the bathtub, suddenly hyper-aware of how vulnerable I was. "Ryan, you're scaring me," I said. That's when he smiled. But it wasn't the sweet, innocent smile I knew. This one felt wrong, forced, almost predatory. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Was this some kind of joke? Or was something seriously wrong with him? "Ryan," I tried again, this time firmer. "Go wait for me in the living room. I'll be out in a minute." But he didn't move. Instead, he knelt beside the tub, his fingers brushing the surface of the water. "You never spend time with me anymore," he said, his voice low and almost sad. "But now you can't ignore me." I felt my stomach twist. This wasn't normal. This wasn't Ryan. "Get out," I snapped, trying to sound more confident than I felt. He flinched but didn't leave. Instead, his hand dipped into the water. I jerked back, my skin prickling with fear. "Ryan, stop this right now." But he didn't. His fingers trailed through the water, slow and deliberate, and when his eyes met mine again, they were darker than I'd ever seen them. "You don't have to be afraid," he said. But I was. I forced myself to stay calm, to think. Maybe he was sleepwalking. Maybe he was having some kind of breakdown. I just needed to get out of the bathroom and call his mom. But then he spoke again. "I'm not letting you go." The words sent a shiver down my spine. "Ryan, this isn't funny," I shouted, but my voice cracked. He leaned closer, and for the first time I saw it, something in his eyes. It wasn't just anger or sadness. It was something darker. Something dangerous. I tried to stand, but my legs felt shaky. The water sloshed around me, and suddenly I felt trapped. "Don't," he said sharply, grabbing my wrist. I gasped, my skin crawling at the touch. "Let go of me," I demanded, pulling away. But his grip tightened. And in that moment I knew whatever this was, it wasn't just a misunderstanding. Something was very, very wrong. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears as Ryan's grip tightened around my wrist. His touch wasn't playful or innocent, it felt deliberate, almost possessive. "Ryan, let go," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but the tremor betrayed me. He didn't let go. Instead, he leaned in closer, his breath warm against my skin. "You don't understand," he whispered, his voice low and unsteady. "I've waited for this, for you to finally see me." My stomach twisted. "See him? What did that even mean?" "Ryan," I said sharply, yanking my arm back, but he held on. "You're scaring me. Let me go right now." His expression softened for a moment, but it wasn't comforting. It was worse, like he thought I owed him something. "You always act like I'm just a kid," he said, his voice breaking. "But I'm not. Not anymore." The words hung in the air, and suddenly, I felt like the temperature in the room had dropped. "I've seen the way you look at me," he continued, his eyes searching mine. "You can't hide it. What are you talking about?" I snapped, panic bubbling up inside me. He smirked, his grip loosening just slightly, but not enough for me to pull away. "I see it when you watch me," he said, his voice quieter now, almost intimate. "You don't even realize it, do you?" My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. "Stop it," I said, shaking my head as tears welled in my eyes. "Whatever you think is going on here, it's not. You're confused, Ryan. Let me go, and we'll talk about this. Please." But he didn't move. Instead, he leaned even closer, his hand trailing down my arm in a way that made my skin crawl. "No one understands me the way you do," he whispered. "No one listens to me, but you always do. You're the only one who really cares." His words made my heart twist with guilt, and for a split second, I questioned myself. Had I misread the situation? Had I been too kind, too nurturing? Had I let him think this was something it wasn't? No, this wasn't my fault. Whatever was happening, it wasn't normal. "Ryan, this isn't right," I said firmly. "You're not yourself. We need to talk to your mom. She can help you." His eyes darkened at the mention of his mother. "She doesn't care about me," he said bitterly. "She never has. But you do." I shook my head. "I care about you as family, Ryan. That's it. You have to stop this." He didn't answer. Instead, his hand slid down to my waist and panic surged through me. "Let go of me," I shouted, shoving him back with all my strength. He stumbled, just enough for me to scramble out of the tub and grab the towel hanging nearby. I wrapped it around myself as fast as I could, my hands trembling. Ryan stared at me, his expression unreadable. But his eyes, they were wild, desperate. "Don't do this," he said softly. "Don't act like you don't feel it too." I backed away, shaking my head. "This has to stop," I said, forcing my voice to sound stronger than I felt. "Right now." He stepped toward me and I froze. "I can't stop," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't want to stop." I swallowed hard, every instinct screaming at me to run. But my legs felt like they were made of lead. "Ryan, please," I whispered. "You're scaring me." His face twisted with pain, and for a moment, I thought he might snap out of it. But then he reached for me again. "No," I said, stepping back quickly. "Stay away from me." He froze, his hands trembling. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't let you leave." That was it. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It wasn't confusion or immaturity. This was obsession. And I had to get out of that bathroom before it was too late. I took a shaky step back, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. Ryan's eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I saw something I couldn't unsee. A hunger, a desperation that made my stomach churn. "Ryan, you need to stop this," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "Whatever this is, it's not real. It's not okay." He didn't move. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as if studying me, searching for a weakness. "It is real," he said softly. "You're the one who doesn't understand." He took another step toward me and I bolted. I shoved past him, nearly slipping on the wet floor as I darted out of the bathroom. My bare feet slapped against the hardwood as I ran down the hall, clutching the towel tightly around me. But Ryan was right behind me. "Stop running," he shouted, his voice echoing in the empty house. I reached the living room and grabbed my phone off the coffee table, but my hands were trembling too hard to unlock it. Before I could get it open, Ryan grabbed my arm and yanked me back. "Let go of me," I screamed, twisting in his grip. "You don't understand," he shouted back. "You can't leave me." His voice cracked, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes, fear. But it disappeared as quickly as it came, replaced by that same dark intensity. "Ryan, please," I said, tears streaming down my face. "This isn't you. You're scaring me." His grip loosened just slightly, and I used that moment to rip free and shove him back. He stumbled, giving me just enough time to run toward the front door. I grabbed the handle and yanked it open, but it wouldn't budge. The deadbolt. My fingers fumbled to unlock it, but before I could, Ryan grabbed me again, spinning me around. "You're not leaving me," he yelled, his voice breaking. I shoved him again, harder this time, and he fell back against the wall. The crash seemed to snap him out of whatever trance he was in, and for a split second his face crumpled. "Aunt Megan, wait," he said, his voice shaking. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. But I didn't wait." I unlocked the door and ran outside, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. I didn't stop until I reached my car, slamming the door shut and locking it behind me. Inside, I sat there panting, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. As the engine roared to life, I looked up and saw Ryan standing in the doorway, his face pale and his eyes wide with something that almost looked like regret. But I didn't stay to find out. I drove straight to Jessica's house, my mind racing the entire way. By the time I got there, my hands were numb from gripping the steering wheel so hard. I banged on the door until she opened it, her eyes widening at the sight of me. "What happened?" she asked, pulling me inside. "It's Ryan," I choked out. "Something's wrong with him." Her face fell. "What do you mean?" I told her everything. The way he'd looked at me, the things he'd said, the way he'd grabbed me. As I spoke, her face shifted from shock to horror to disbelief. "No," she said, shaking her head. "Not Ryan. He couldn't." "You didn't see him," I snapped. "You didn't see his eyes." Jessica sank onto the couch, her face pale. "There's something wrong," I said. "He's not the same kid he used to be." We called the police that night. When they arrived, they found Ryan in my house, sitting on the living room floor. He didn't resist. He didn't say a word. But the look in his eyes when they led him away made my blood run cold. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. In the days that followed, Jessica tried to reach out to me, tried to explain that Ryan had been struggling, that he'd been seeing a counselor for anxiety and depression. But I couldn't bring myself to believe it was that simple. Because when I closed my eyes at night, all I could see was the way he looked at me in that bathroom. The way his fingers lingered on my skin, the way his voice dropped to that unsettling whisper. And the worst part, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just Ryan in that house with me that night. There was something else. Something darker. And whatever it wasn't finished. The days after Ryan was taken away felt like a blur. My house, once a place of comfort, now felt hollow, like the shadows had grown darker and the walls had closed in. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still there, watching me, even though I knew it wasn't possible. Jessica called me constantly, begging me to visit Ryan at the facility where he was being evaluated. "He's not well, Megan," she said over the phone, her voice breaking. "He's scared. He keeps asking for you." I gripped the phone tighter, my stomach twisting. "I can't, Jess. I can't." She started crying and guilt gnawed at me, but no matter how much I wanted to help her, I couldn't face him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The nightmares didn't help. Every night, I saw his face, those dark, empty eyes staring at me. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart racing as if I'd been running for my life. But it wasn't just the dreams that haunted me. Strange things started happening in the house. Doors creaked open on their own. Footsteps echoed down the hall when I was alone. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I swore I heard his voice whispering my name. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, the lingering effects of trauma. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. One evening, I found myself standing outside Ryan's room. I hadn't gone in since the night it all happened, but something pulled me there. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and my breath caught in my throat. Everything was exactly as he'd left it, books stacked neatly on the desk, clothes folded in the corner. But it didn't feel empty. It felt alive. I stepped inside, and that's when I saw it. On the desk was a notebook. I hadn't noticed it before, but it was open, and the pages were filled with drawings, disturbing images of dark figures and twisted faces, all staring out at me. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. And then I saw it. A sketch of me. I dropped the notebook and stumbled back, my pulse racing. What was happening? Was he obsessed with me? Possessed? Or was it something even darker than that? I tried to tell Jessica about the drawings, but she dismissed it. "He's just a kid, Megan," she said. "He's confused and scared. He didn't mean to hurt you." But I wasn't so sure anymore. The whispers didn't stop. The shadows in the house seemed to move when I wasn't looking. And then one night I saw him. I was lying in bed, trying to sleep, when I heard it, the soft creak of the floor outside my room. My stomach dropped, and I froze listening. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. "Ryan," I whispered, even though I knew it couldn't be him. There was no answer. Just silence. I held my breath and waited. And then the doorknob turned. I shot out of bed and flipped on the light, but when I opened the door, the hallway was empty. I wanted to believe it was my imagination, that the trauma had broken something inside me. But deep down I knew the truth. Ryan might have been taken away, but whatever had changed him, whatever darkness had taken hold, it was still here. And it wasn't finished with me. The days dragged on, but the fear never left me. I tried to move forward, to convince myself that Ryan's behavior had been nothing more than a mental breakdown, a moment of instability that could be treated and resolved. But late at night, when the house was silent and shadows stretched across the walls, I couldn't escape the lingering sense that something darker was at play. I avoided Jessica's calls for weeks, but eventually, the guilt became too heavy to carry. I finally agreed to meet her at the facility where Ryan was being treated. When I saw him, my stomach twisted. He looked pale, thinner than before, but his eyes, those eyes, were the same. Empty and hollow. "Megan," he whispered, his voice soft but strained. I froze, my body screaming at me to run, but Jessica nudged me forward. "He's been asking about you nonstop," she said. "He feels terrible about what happened. Please just talk to him." I swallowed my fear and sat down across from him, my heart pounding so hard it felt like my ribs might crack. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't know what came over me. I wasn't myself." His words hung in the air, and I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that the boy sitting in front of me was the same Ryan I'd known and loved. But something inside me wouldn't let me. "What happened that night, Ryan?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked down, his fingers twisting nervously in his lap. "I don't know," he said finally. "It's like something took over." I could hear it in my head. It kept telling me things, making me feel things I didn't want to feel. My stomach dropped. "What kind of things?" I pressed. He looked up at me then, and for the first time, I saw tears in his eyes. "That you were the only one who understood me," he said. "That you were the only one who could ever care about me." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to believe him, to believe that it was all in his mind, a product of stress and confusion. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something else, something darker, had planted those thoughts inside him. As I left the facility that day, I felt a strange sense of closure, but it wasn't the comforting kind. It was the kind that felt more like a warning. I spent the next few weeks trying to reclaim my life. I redecorated the house, replaced furniture, and did everything I could to erase the memory of that night. But some scars don't fade. To this day, I can't close my eyes without seeing his face, without hearing his voice whispering my name. And I still check the locks on my doors, twice, sometimes 3 times, before going to bed. Because no matter how much I try to convince myself that Ryan was just a troubled boy, I can't ignore the lingering question that haunts me. What if it wasn't Ryan at all? What if it was something else? And what if it's still out there waiting? What would you have done in my situation? Was Ryan just a troubled boy, or was something far more sinister at play? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear the rest of this story, or uncover more shocking secrets, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There's so much more to this nightmare. And it's far from over.